The dropship burned as it fell through the thick red skies of Tarsis IV, its engine screaming, hull cracking under the weight of re-entry. Commander Ryland Cole gripped the edge of his seat, blood dripping from a cut above his eye as the ship shook violently. Everything had gone wrong. The mission was meant to be a quiet recon, just to check in on some strange energy readings from an old human outpost. But anti-air weapons had slammed into their descent path, tearing the ship apart. When it finally hit the jungle below, metal screeched and trees exploded into flames. Silence followed. Ryland groaned and forced himself to crawl out of the burning wreckage. The jungle around him was thick, the air hot and filled with smoke. His team was gone, no voices, no movement, just broken metal and ash. He stumbled forward, one boot half melted, his suit torn and pain stabbing through his ribs. His visor was cracked and dirt covered the patch on his chest, the old Earth Defense Command insignia, a symbol from a war long past. He didn't think it meant anything anymore. The Council had buried it and the galaxy had moved on. But he was alive, and survival was the only thing that mattered now. The jungle was alive with strange sounds. Tarsis IV was supposed to be uninhabited, but Ryland could feel eyes watching him. He raised his sidearm, slow and steady, every muscle ready for a fight. Then the sound of footsteps came light, graceful, careful. A figure stepped from between two giant red trees. She wasn't human. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, and her long, slender body moved with a quiet grace. Her eyes glowed violet, watching him with something between fear and awe. She didn't raise a weapon. Instead, she stopped a few feet away and stared at his chest. Her lips parted in a soft gasp. Her glowing eyes widened. Then, to Ryland's shock, she fell to her knees before him. Her blade slipped from her hand and landed silently in the grass. He stood frozen, unsure whether to aim or help. But she looked up at him, not in fear, but with tears in her eyes. "You're the one," she whispered, her voice trembling. He frowned, completely confused. "What are you talking about?" She reached out slowly and pointed at his chest, right where the old symbol sat under dirt and soot. "The flame of Terra," she said, voice low and full of wonder. "The mark of the Fireborn. You wear it, just as it was shown in the ancient scrolls." Ryland looked down at the patch, half burned, faded by time and war. "This? It's just an old badge," he said. "I'm just a soldier." But she shook her head. "No. The one would return when the stars began to fall. The last warrior. From the fire world, the one who brings hope. You are him." Ryland was about to argue, to tell her she had the wrong man, when the jungle behind her exploded in fire and sound. Plasma blasts burned through trees. Giant metal shapes crashed forward machines that looked like insects, their bodies dark and sharp, eyes glowing red. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. They just opened fire. Without thinking, Ryland grabbed the alien woman's arm and pulled her to her feet. "Move!" he shouted. She ran with him through the jungle as plasma bolts lit up the trees behind them. He didn't know where they were going, and he didn't care. He just needed cover, a way to get distance, and maybe figure out what the hell was going on. They jumped over roots and ducked under low branches as the sounds of metal claws tore into the earth. The machines were fast, and Ryland knew they wouldn't stop. He'd heard of them before Karnix, ancient war drones from a lost age, reawakened for some dark purpose. He hadn't believed the stories. Now he was living one. As they ran, the alien woman kept looking at him like he was some kind of savior. Ryland didn't feel like one. He felt like a man out of time, dragged into a fight he didn't understand. Chased by machines he couldn't stop, but she kept whispering, even as they ran. "The one, you came. You really came." Ryland didn't answer. He just ran faster, holding on to his weapon, holding on to the fading strength in his legs. Somewhere deep in the jungle, he knew something worse waited. And he also knew something strange was beginning. Because when she looked at him, she didn't see a broken soldier. She saw something greater. And that terrified him more than the machines behind them. Raylan and the alien woman ran through the thick jungle, dodging plasma fire and mechanical claws that tore through trees behind them. His heart pounded as the metal monsters Karnak's war drones chased them without rest. He had never seen machines like these before, not even in old war reports. They were fast, silent, and deadly, moving like shadows made of steel. The alien woman, who had called him the One, led the way with surprising speed, guiding him through narrow trails and hidden paths only she seemed to know. Her name, he soon learned, was Vela. She spoke as they moved, her voice low and urgent, telling him they were close to a safe place, an old temple built into the rocks beneath the jungle floor. Just as his legs were giving out and his breath came in sharp gasps, they reached a stone arch hidden under moss and roots. Vela pressed her hand to the side of the wall, and the stone shifted, revealing a narrow tunnel lit by soft blue lights. They slipped inside and the entrance closed behind them. The sound of the jungle faded, and for a moment there was peace. Inside, the air was cool and still. The tunnel led them into a wide chamber filled with glowing crystals, old carvings, and strange machines that looked like they hadn't been touched in centuries. Raylan collapsed onto a stone bench, breathing hard, while Vela knelt nearby and whispered something in her language. After a moment, she turned to him and said, "You should not have come." "Not yet. The stars have not finished falling." Raylan looked at her, confused and tired. "What do you mean? Why did you kneel back there? What is this place?" Vela stood and walked to one of the walls where a large circular mural was carved. It showed a man in strange armor standing before an army of machines. Behind him, a flame rose into the sky. She pointed at the man. The scrolls tell of a warrior from Terra, the fire world, who would return when the darkness came back. You wear the symbol, the flame of Terra. Raylan looked down at the patch on his chest. He had almost forgotten it was there. It was old from his early days as a soldier, before Earth joined the larger Galactic Council and disbanded the old defense forces. That symbol was supposed to be history. Vela sat beside him and told him more. Her people, the Jurai, had been the guardians of peace and knowledge in this part of the galaxy. Long ago, they had fought beside humans against the Karnak's machines, weapons created by a lost empire. Together, they had won the war, or so they believed. But after the humans disappeared from this region, after Earth turned inward, the Karnaks slowly began to return. Now they were fully awake again, spreading from world to world like a plague, destroying everything in their path. "The Council won't help us," she said bitterly. "They fear the machines but won't fight. They signed peace deals and called the past a myth." She looked at Raylan with wide, glowing eyes. "But we never forgot. We believed the One would return, the human warrior with fire in his heart. We just never expected him to fall from the sky in a broken ship." Raylan shook his head slowly. "I'm not the One. I'm a survivor. My ship was hit, my crew is dead, and I don't even know what I'm doing here." But even as he said the words, he felt something stirring inside him. The Karnaks were not just a threat to this planet. They were a threat to everything, and no one else was stopping them. Vela stood and walked to a pedestal in the center of the chamber. She touched it, and the glass sphere rose from inside, a glowing orb pulsing with soft golden light. "This is a soul core," she said, "a relic from the old war. It can only be awakened by the One. We have kept it safe waiting." She held it out to him. Raylan hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached out and placed his hand on it. The moment his skin touched the surface, the light flared, and a deep hum filled the chamber. The ground trembled out above the temple. In the jungle, something stirred. A hidden platform began to rise from the ground metal walls covered in vines, peeled back, revealing a forgotten hangar buried beneath the trees. Inside it rested a ship, sleek and powerful, with sharp wings and heavy weapons. Its hull was dark gray with faint red lines shaped like flames. Raylan stared at it through a screen inside the chamber. The ship was waking up, lights blinking to life, engines humming softly. It had been asleep, waiting for something or someone. "It's called the Resolute Flame," Vela said, her voice soft. "A warship of Terra, lost long ago. Now it lives again. Because of you." Rylan stood slowly, his body aching, his mind spinning. The ship had accepted him. The Soul Core had answered him. Maybe he wasn't the one from the stories, but something ancient had been set in motion. And whatever it was, he couldn't walk away from it. Not now. The Karniks were coming, and this ship, this moment, it might be the only chance the galaxy had left. He looked at Vela and nodded. "All right," he said. "Let's see what this old flame can do." Across the galaxy, panic was spreading. Colonies had gone silent. Trade ships had vanished without distress calls. Council fleets sent to investigate never returned. It began with whispers, rumors of black ships that moved like ghosts, machines that didn't speak, didn't ask, didn't stop. Then came the images: burned cities, melted starports, dead worlds. The Karniks were not just waking up, they were consuming everything in their path. On worlds that had known peace for centuries, skies turned black with fire. And the galaxy realized too late that it wasn't a war that had come, it was a purge. The Karniks had no leaders, no diplomacy, no demands. They simply erased. Meanwhile, on Tarsi's 4, the Resolute Flame hovered above the jungle in silence, ancient engines humming low. Raylan stood on the bridge, eyes scanning the controls. They felt familiar, even though he had never seen them before. It was as if the ship remembered him or remembered someone like him. The AI greeted him by name when he stepped aboard. "Welcome back, Commander Cole," it had said, calm and clear, as if no time had passed. Now, as the systems came online, he saw old logs, battles from the first Karniks War, missions buried in Earth's lost archives. This ship had once fought the machines before, and it had survived. That alone made it a legend. Vela walked beside him, her eyes wide with wonder. She had never seen human technology up close, and yet something about it felt right to her. The carvings and symbols on the ship matched the ancient scrolls of her people. To the Jirai, the flame was not just a machine, it was a promise. Rylan, however, didn't believe in fate. He believed in planning, strategy, and firepower. Still, as he stood at the helm, watching the systems lock into place, he couldn't shake the feeling that something old and dangerous had just awakened, and not just the Karniks. The ship's sensors scanned the skies above Tarsi's 4. What they found confirmed his fears. A Karnik's dreadnought was entering the system. Massive, cold, covered in strange glowing lines, it was a machine built for one purpose: destruction. Smaller drones swarmed around it like insects around a hive. "They're not waiting anymore," Raylan muttered. "They're coming to finish what they started." He turned to Vela. "If they take this planet, your people won't survive." She nodded. "And if they reach my homeworld, they will destroy everything." Rylan made a decision. They couldn't fight the dreadnought here, not alone. But they could run and warn others. He set a course for Valjer, the Jirai homeworld. The ship's engines flared, and the Resolute Flame shot into the stars. As they entered FTL, Vela sat beside him, silent for a long time. Then she spoke. "My people have always believed the One would return. They said he would ride a ship born of fire and light, and that he would lead us in our darkest hour. Raylan shook his head. I'm not a hero. I'm a man who survived a crash and picked up an old patch. But even as he said the words, he could feel something changing. The ship, the Carnix, the strange energy in the soul core, it all pointed to something bigger. And now, like it or not, he was at the center of it. As they neared Val'jur, the FTL drive dropped them into a nightmare. Dozens of Carnix ships hung in space like black knives. The Jurai defense fleet was struggling to hold them off, and fires burned across the planet below. The AI gave a warning. Enemy fleet detected, outnumbered 10-1. Ryland didn't flinch. Open a channel to all Jurai ships, he said. The comms crackled to life. This is Commander Ryland Cole of the Earth Defense Command. Reinforcements have arrived. Rally on my position. Let's show these machines what fire really means. At first, there was only static. Then came a voice shaky, but clear. Flame of Terra. We hear you. One by one, Jurai ships began to move toward him, forming up behind the resolute flame. Ryland took the lead, diving into the enemy swarm. With perfect control. The ship's weapons lit up, plasma tearing through drones with brutal speed. The ship's AI adjusted to his commands instantly, predicting enemy movements and helping him outmaneuver them. Vela watched, eyes wide with awe. It flies like it's alive, she whispered. Ryland smirked. It's more than alive. It's angry. The battle turned quickly. With the flame at the front, the Jurai fleet found strength. They hit harder, moved faster, and followed Ryland's lead with full trust. Together, they carved a path through the Carnix forces, pushing them back. But deep in the center of the enemy fleet, a shape began to move, huge, cold, and pulsing with energy. It was the Carnix Prime, the central brain behind the swarm, the source of command, and likely the reason the machines had returned. The Prime scanned the battlefield, then targeted the flame. A beam of dark red light shot toward them, nearly tearing the ship apart. Systems blinked. Warnings filled the bridge. The hull groaned. Raylan was thrown from his chair, bleeding, dazed. The AI said they had taken heavy damage. Vela pulled him up. We can't beat it like this, she said. We must retreat. Raylan shook his head. We retreat now. They finish Val'jur. This is where we make our stand. He climbed back into the seat, face bloody but eyes sharp. Divert power from non-essentials to weapons. Prep every missile. We're going in. The AI hesitated, then obeyed. The ship turned, engines roaring, aimed straight at the heart of the Carnix fleet. The last flame of Terra had chosen its target, and it was ready to burn. The resolute flame moved like a living thing, slipping between enemy fire with the grace of a predator. Ryland gripped the controls, his focus sharp, sweat sliding down his neck. Alarms blared, red lights flashed across the bridge and the ships. AI called out damage reports, but he ignored everything that didn't involve aiming, dodging, or surviving. Around him, the sky of space was Chaos Carnix warships closed in from every angle, their weapons glowing red and deadly. But the flame was not just another warship. It was built for a time when humanity fought wars that shook stars, and now it remembered its purpose. It roared through the Carnix lines, cutting them down with precision strikes. Plasma beams shot. From its wings, missiles flew in tight arcs, and railguns tore enemy ships apart in seconds. Behind it, the Jurai defenders gained courage. Inspired by the sight of a human vessel long believed to be extinct, they regrouped and pushed forward, their small ships weaving through the wreckage of burning drones. Raylan called out commands over the comms, coordinating the counterattack. Using old Terran tactics that the Carnix hadn't seen in over 1,000 years. The machines began to falter. Their patterns, once perfect, broke for moments. That was all Ryland needed. Each time the Karnix adapted, Rylan changed the rhythm: left, rise, dive, fire. He flew like the ship was part of his body. Vela sat beside him, watching in awe as he turned the tide of battle. Her people had legends of the Fireborn, the warrior who would ride the flame into the storm, but she had never believed them until now. "You fly like fire," she whispered. "You lead like the scroll said." Rylan didn't reply. His eyes were locked on the massive shape ahead. The Karnix Prime was waiting, huge and silent, watching the battlefield with glowing red eyes. Its shield shimmered with dark energy. Rylan knew that if they didn't destroy that ship, nothing they did would matter. He ordered the fleet to clear a path. Missiles and cannon fire tore into the Karnix ranks, creating a narrow lane. The flame surged forward, drawing all enemy attention. Drones swarmed around them, scratching the hull with sharp energy blasts. The shields flickered and systems dimmed. The AI warned of critical failures. Rylan didn't slow down. He targeted the Prime and launched everything missiles, plasma, railguns, but the Prime shield absorbed most of it. Then it responded. A red beam lanced from its core, cutting through space like a blade. It missed by inches, burning a hole in one of the Jurai ships behind them. Rylan cursed and dove low, flying the flame under enemy fire and straight toward the Prime's belly. "How do we get through that shield?" he asked. Vela, her hands glowing faintly from the energy of the soul core, stepped forward. "I think I can weaken it. The core inside this ship is alive. It responds to my touch, but it responds more to you." Rylan nodded. "Do it." She moved to the engine chamber, placed her hands on the glowing sphere, and whispered in her language. The lights in the ship changed, turned from white to deep orange. The pulse of the engine grew stronger, and the weapon surged with new power. Suddenly, the flame was brighter, faster, deadlier. It roared back into the fight. Rylan aimed everything at the center of the Prime and fired. The blast cracked the shield. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to shake it. The Prime launched more drones, hundreds of them, and the flame was hit. Fire broke out on the bridge. The ship groaned under the weight of the damage. Sparks flew from the ceiling. Rylan was thrown back as the control panel exploded. Vela ran to him, pulling him up. "We can't take another hit like that," she said. "We have to retreat." Rylan stared at the screen, showing the Karnix Prime slowly turning toward the planet below. "No," he said firmly. "If we run, Val'Jur dies." He limped back to the seat, blood on his face, and started typing in a new flight path. "I'm going in. One last strike. If I can get close enough, maybe we can overload the core and use it to burn through that shield." The AI spoke again. "Warning. Overloading the soul core may destroy this ship." Rylan looked at Vela. She didn't flinch. "Do it," she said. "Let the flame burn as it was meant to." They flew straight toward the Prime, dodging fire, engines shaking, hull cracking. Drones rammed the ship, trying to stop them. They held together through willpower and the fury of the flame. As they neared the Prime, Vela poured her energy into the core, and Rylan armed every last weapon they had. The glow of the flame turned white hot. The Prime opened its cannon for one final blast. Rylan smiled. Not today. He hit the trigger. Everything went white. The explosion that followed lit the sky of Val'Jur like a second sun. Karnix ships burned and fell. The Prime was torn apart, its pieces drifting into space like shattered bones. And at the center of the fire, the resolute flame vanished into light. The fire from the explosion still burned in the sky above Val'Jur as the last pieces of the Karnix Prime drifted in silence. Its destruction had stunned both the Jurai and the remaining Karnix ships. The massive war form, the mind behind the Swarm had been wiped out in a single act of fire and fury. For a moment, everything stood still. The drones stopped moving like puppets without strings. Then, slowly, one by one, they began to fall. Without the Prime, their link was broken. The smaller warforms, once deadly and coordinated, lost direction and crashed into each other or floated aimlessly in space. Jurai fighters, once struggling to survive, now turned into hunters. They chased down the broken Karnix units and destroyed them quickly, cleanly. A cheer echoed across the communication channels, voices rising from every corner of the battlefield. The machines were retreating and the defenders of Val'jur had won, but they knew the truth. They hadn't won alone. Every pilot, every soldier, and every civilian looked up into the skies where the explosion had come from and whispered one name, Rylan Cole. But aboard the Resolute Flame, there was no victory speech. Alarms still echoed inside the dark ship. The AI was silent. Systems were failing. The Soul Core, now dim, had given everything. Raylan lay half-conscious on the bridge, blood dripping from his head, his body shaking with pain. The ship had barely held together long enough to deliver the final strike. The core overload had broken through the Karnix shield and shattered their strongest weapon, but the cost had been too high. The hull was torn open in several places, oxygen leaking, fires burning in the lower decks. Vela crawled across the broken floor, her hands glowing faintly as she reached for Rylan. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't leave yet." He opened his eyes just slightly and smiled, weak and tired. "Did it work?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, you did it," but they both knew time was short. The escape pod had been damaged, and only one could fit inside now. Rylan tried to sit up but collapsed again. "Take it. Get out of here," he said through clenched teeth. "I'll hold the ship," Vela refused. "I will not leave you." "Not after all this. Not now." The ship shook again, more systems breaking down. The AI came back online briefly, voice weak and flickering. "Commander, only one survival pod functional. Recommend immediate evacuation." Rylan pushed Vela toward the pod, even as the ship tilted dangerously. "You've got to go. They need you down there, your people. They need hope. You carry it now." Vela's hands trembled as she pressed them against his chest, right over the worn flame of Terra's symbol. "But you are the one, the warrior in the fire. Without you, the prophecy." Raylan cut her off with a small, tired laugh. "Prophecies are just stories, but people, they're real. And you're one of the strongest I've ever seen. You'll keep the fire burning." With tears running down her face, she nodded, kissed his forehead gently, then stepped into the escape pod. The door closed. Raylan gave one last salute as the pod launched, leaving the ship behind. From the surface of Val'jur, the people watched a small trail of fire streak down from the sky. The pod landed in the valley near the main city, and Jurai healers rushed to open it. Vela stepped out, weak but alive, holding in her hands something sacred, the torn fabric of Rylan's uniform, the flame of Terra still glowing faintly under layers of smoke and ash. She stood before her people and raised it high. "He came from the stars," she said loudly, her voice shaking. "And he gave everything to stop the machines. Rylan Cole, the Fireborn. He is gone, but he saved us all." The crowd went silent, eyes wide, some kneeling, some crying. And then, as if carried by the wind itself, the name spread through cities, through coms, through stars. Ships across the Jurai worlds picked up the signal. Colonies once lost in fear began to call each other. And then came a message carried through ancient channels, repeating again and again. "The flame lives. Terra burns once more. The fire has returned." The Karnak's retreat became a full collapse. Without the Prime to guide them, they fell into chaos. Other fleets from different worlds joined the fight, following the call of the flame. Even races that had once stayed silent now rose up. The legend of the last human warship, of the man who fell from the stars and led a final charge, lit a fire. In the galaxy, not one of destruction but one of resistance. Vela traveled to each planet touched by war, sharing Ryland's story. She carried the piece of his uniform wherever she went. The mark on his chest, once forgotten, now became a symbol of strength. It was painted on ships, worn by soldiers, carved into buildings. A flame on dark cloth, simple but powerful. Ryland was gone. His sacrifice had become something larger than any one man. It became the beginning of a movement, a cry against fear, and a reminder that one soul, burning bright, could stand against the dark. The flame had done more than win a battle. It had reignited the will to fight across a dying galaxy. And far above, among the stars, where wreckage drifted silently through black space, the broken remains of the resolute flame still floated, burned, shattered, but not forgotten. The last ship of Terra had gone out in fire and left behind a sky full of light. The flame had won the battle, but the price was heavy. In the hours that followed the great explosion, fires still burned in the sky and wreckage floated across Valjure's upper orbit like shattered bones of giants. The people below lit lights. In their cities, not in celebration, but in mourning and respect for the one who had delivered them from death. Ryland Cole, the human who had fallen from the stars, was believed to be gone, taken by the same fire he used to destroy the Karnaks. Prime, the name Fireborn, was now spoken with deep honor among the Jurei and beyond. On every world that had felt the cold shadow of the Karnaks, that name brought hope. Across the stars, more fleets stood up to resist. Soldiers and leaders who had once hidden or hesitated now prepared for war. But while the story spread like wildfire, and while people began to rise again, there was still a wound in Vela's heart that could not heal. She had fought beside Ryland, believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. And in the end, she had left him behind on a burning ship because he made her promise to survive. She carried the symbol from his uniform. Everywhere she went, a patch stained by blood, smoke, and fire, but still whole. She kept it wrapped in cloth, treated it like something sacred. Every time she spoke to a crowd or walked through a healing center, someone would stop and whisper, "Is it true? Did he really exist?" And she would answer softly, "Yes, he was real. He saved us." But even as she told others to be strong, to carry on his fire, she felt hollow inside. She couldn't forget his final smile, the way his hands pushed her into the pod, the quiet courage in his eyes. Still, she did what she had to do. She stood before the Jurei Council and told them to prepare their ships. She met with human allies, long-lost colonies that had scattered during earlier wars. She traveled to broken worlds and spoke of the Paunti, man who had turned the tide. She built alliances. She spread the flame. Weeks passed, then months. The galaxy changed. The Karnaks, once growing like a storm, had pulled back. Without their prime, they were slower, more confused. But they were not finished. Everyone knew they would return. It was only a matter of time. One evening, Vela stood at a quiet observatory far outside the Jurei capital. She looked up at the stars, eyes full of questions. The war wasn't over, but the galaxy had been given time to prepare, to recover, to stand. And yet, she wondered what Ryland would have done next. Would he have led a new army? Would he have stayed behind the lines, smiling at how others now carried the torch? As the stars shimmered above, a young Jurei pilot rushed in behind her, breathless. "Vila," he said, "we've picked up a signal. A pod drifting near the moons of Silarka." She turned sharply, heart pounding. A pod? From where? The pilot looked stunned. It's human, old design. From Earth Defense Command. Her hands trembled as she grabbed his arm. Take me there. Now. The journey to Silorka felt like a lifetime. The system was quiet, the stars there dim and cold. But floating near the outer moon, barely powered, was a damaged survival pod. The ship approached slowly. Vela stood at the airlock, hands tight at her sides. The moment the pod was brought aboard, she ran forward. Its surface was blackened. From heat and impact, the outer shell cracked. A team worked quickly to cut it open. And when they pulled the door wide, time stopped. Inside lay a man, unconscious but breathing. Wounds covered his body. His armor was broken. His face was pale. But it was him. It was Rylan Cole. Her breath caught. She stepped forward, touched his face gently, and tears ran down her cheeks. "You're alive," she whispered. "You stubborn, impossible human." He was rushed into a medical chamber, and for 2 days he drifted between life and death. Machines healed what they could. He had burns, broken ribs, and deep internal injuries. But on the 3rd day, his eyes opened. His first words were rough and slow. "Did it work?" Vela leaned close and smiled through tears. "You destroyed the Prime. You saved Valjer. You saved us all." He blinked, confused. "How long?" She told him everything. The stories, the people rising, the symbol he wore now painted on ships across the galaxy. His hand moved. Slowly to his chest, where the patch had once been. "The flame still burns?" She nodded. "Everywhere." He tried to sit up, winced, then gave a tired grin. "Guess I'm not finished after all." Vela laughed softly. "Not even close." For the first time since that day in the jungle, her heart felt whole again. As Rylan recovered, messages poured in. World after world asked for him. Fleets wanted his guidance. Soldiers wanted his orders. But he said little, resting quietly, speaking only when needed. One day, he stood outside the medbay, staring at the stars with Vela. She asked him what he would do next. He looked out at the sky and said, "The war isn't over. The Karniks will return. But now we fight on our terms. Not as prey, not in fear, but as fire." She stepped to fight him. "We will fight with you." He smiled and said, "Good, because the galaxy hasn't seen what humanity can really do yet." And in the silence that followed, the stars above seemed brighter, as if they too had been waiting for the flame to return. A month passed since Rylan Cole had been found alive in the drifting escape pod, and in that time the galaxy had changed even more. News of his survival spread faster than fire across dry grass. What was once only legend had become truth. People who had never seen Earth, who thought humans were only myths told in war stories, now saw a living face and heard a real voice. Soldiers, rebels, leaders, even civilians, millions of them tuned in when Rylan made his first public address. From the Jirai capital, he stood beside Vela on a raised platform, his body still weak but his voice strong. He didn't speak like a hero. He spoke like a man who had seen too much death and wanted to stop more from coming. He told them the truth. The Karniks were damaged, confused, and leaderless, but they were not gone, and they would return. Stronger, smarter, colder. He said there wasn't time to wait. They had to strike first. The crowd listened in silence, and when he finished, they rose to their feet as one. They didn't cheer for victory. They stood for the fight to come. That day, a new alliance was formed. Dozens of species, old enemies, and lost allies came together under a single name, the Flame Pact, and Rylan Cole was placed at its head, not as a ruler, but as a battle commander. The first mission came quickly. Scanners picked up Karnak's energy deep within the ruined moons of Drasil, a system no one had visited in decades. It was there the machines had begun rebuilding something, a new prime or something worse. Rylan, now mostly healed, suited up again. Vela joined him, not just as a guide this time, but as a warrior. She had trained, studied the flame systems, and proved herself in countless drills. The two of them led the operation from the bridge. Of a newly rebuilt Resolute Flame, restored from wreckage, fused with Juraya tech and made stronger than ever before. The ship wasn't just a relic now, it was a symbol of unity. The fleet launched together, humans from scattered colonies. Jurai warships, insectoid scouts, aquatic cruisers, dozens of kinds of vessels moving as one. The target was a hidden Karnak's forge deep under the surface of a broken moon. The machines had built it in silence, protected by metal towers, shield grids, and drone swarms. It was a fortress built in darkness. The battle began with silence, then erupted with fire. The flame led the first wave, its weapons glowing with upgraded plasma cores, tearing holes in Karnak's formations. Rylan stood tall on the bridge, shouting orders and adjusting strategy with every shift in the enemy's movement. He didn't just fight like a soldier, he felt like a machine, always 5 steps ahead. Vela manned the shield systems, rerouting. Power, shouting back suggestions, fighting beside him like an equal. Drones swarmed them, endless and cold. Ships were lost good people, brave allies, but the fleet pushed forward. Rylan ordered a second wave to flank the shield generators, and when the opening came, he dove the flame into the heart of the forge. Inside, the enemy was worse than expected. Massive machines were being built larger than any drone seen before. Their cores pulsed with deep red energy, and their armor shimmered like living metal. These weren't just replacements. They were evolutions. The Karnaks were building a new kind of war. Rylan realized the truth then. This wasn't just a rebuild. It was a rebirth. He called for the fleet to focus everything on the core, the energy center powering the forge. But the forge was protected by a new type of shield, one that twisted energy itself. Normal weapons failed. That's when Vela stepped forward and offered something dangerous. She could interface with the soul core again, the same way she had during the final battle before. But this time, she would need to connect fully, risking her life to disrupt the shield's energy. Rylan said no. He had already nearly lost her once. But she placed her hand over his heart and whispered, "You gave everything for us. Let me give something back." He watched her walk to the core chamber, her steps steady, her eyes calm. As the ship shook under fire, she placed her hands on the core, and light filled the ship again, bright, golden, alive. The flame burned hotter, faster, stronger. Rylan didn't waste the chance. He launched a final strike, firing every missile beam and railgun at the weakened forge. The blast tore through the core, and the moon cracked open. The forge collapsed into itself, sending waves of fire across the Karnak's lines. The enemy forces began to fall, their new designs unfinished and unprotected. The fleet cheered across all channels. The mission was a success. The forge was gone. But on the bridge, Rylan rushed to the core chamber, terrified. Vela lay on the floor, eyes closed, her body still glowing faintly. He knelt beside her, lifting her gently. For a terrifying moment, he thought she was gone. Then she opened her eyes slowly and whispered, "The fire still lives." He laughed through tears and held her close. She had survived. They both had. But more importantly, the galaxy had just taken a step forward together. The Flame Pact had drawn blood from the Karnaks again. The machines had learned that this time they wouldn't be fighting scattered defenders. They would be facing a fire that could not be put out. And as Rylan looked up at the burning sky above the ruined moon, he whispered the words that had once been said to him, words he now understood fully. We are the fire, and we do not kneel. The final chapter of the Flame Pack's first war came on a cold, dead world known only as Echelon 9, a barren rock where the Karniks had built their last stronghold. It was not just another base, it was their command core, the last network hub, still linking all surviving drones, warforms, and hidden factories across the stars. If this place fell, the Karniks would become scattered and leaderless again, unable to rebuild, unable to coordinate. But the machines knew this too, and they prepared for humanity and its allies. Their defense was like nothing seen before. Towers taller than mountains, cannons powered by stolen suns, skies filled with swarms of living metal. Yet even with all this, they feared one thing above all, the return of the flame. Raylan Cole stood aboard the bridge of the Resolute Flame, now a legend among the stars. Around him, the largest fleet the Flame Pact had ever gathered floated in silence, waiting for his word. Ships from 50 worlds, fighters from ancient rival empires, even peaceful races who had taken up arms for the first time in centuries. They waited not because they feared the Karniks, but because they believed in him. They had seen what he did at Val'jur and Drasil. They had heard how he burned through the Karniks' prime. Now they followed, not out of duty, but out of fire. Rylan didn't speak long. His message was simple. We fight not to destroy, but to survive. We stand not for conquest, but for life. And today, we finish what the machine started. The battle began like thunder crashing in space. The packed fleet opened fire, and the Karniks responded with equal fury. The dark world lit up with the glow of war. Cannons roared. Energy shields flared and cracked. Ships vanished in bright flashes, but still they pressed on. The flame darted through the fight like a burning spear, cutting through drone lines and shielding smaller vessels. Vela stood beside Rylan, guiding the ship's systems, her hands glowing once more with the power of the Soul Core. The machines, recognizing the ship, sent everything they had. Wave after wave crashed against the flame, but it held. The hull burned, the bridge shook, and warning lights filled the air, but the heart of the ship and the man at its helm did not break. As the fleet pushed toward the surface, Rylan led the strike team to land on the planet. They had one goal: reach the central core chamber and shut down the Karniks network. The team included elite warriors from every packed world. Vela joined them, refusing to stay behind. This ends with us, she said. The landing was brutal. Fire rained from the sky and machines burst from the ground like insects. The team fought street by street, crater by crater, through a world of death and steel. But they never stopped moving. Each step forward was earned with blood. Each moment was filled with screams and courage. And finally, they reached the Cora, massive spire of black crystal and living code, pulsing with red light. The Karniks sent their last defense, a creature taller than any tank, shaped like a human but made of dark armor and rage. It was the echo, a final copy of every warform, every tactic, every death. The battle against the Echo was the hardest they had ever faced. It adapted to every weapon, dodged every blow, and struck with impossible force. Soldiers were thrown aside, weapons melted, ground torn apart. But Rylan stepped forward, carrying a charge built from the Soul Core's energy. Vela followed him, bleeding but unbroken. Together, they moved through the chaos, dodging fire, climbing wreckage, until they reached the core. The Echo turned to stop them, but it was too late. Rylan threw the charge into the heart of the spire, and Vela used her link to trigger it. A great light exploded outward, not of heat or fire, but of silence. The machines froze. The Echo stumbled, its eyes dimming. The towers cracked, the code broke. And across the galaxy, every Karnik still standing simply stopped moving. The war was over after the explosion. Rylan awoke in a healing chamber aboard the Flame. Vela was beside him, hand resting on his. She smiled through tears. "We won," she whispered. "It's over." He looked at her and said, "No, it's just the beginning." In the days that followed, the galaxy changed once again. Worlds that had known fear now knew freedom. The Flame Pack turned from war to rebuilding. They built new alliances, not based on fear, but on choice. Ships once made for battle were repurposed for peace. And in the center of it all was a symbol simple and strong, a red flame on black. Raylan Cole refused titles. He stayed as commander, never king. He traveled between systems, helped people rebuild, trained the next generation. Vela stayed with him always, his partner in war and peace. Years later, children on many worlds would learn his story. Some thought it was a myth. Others believed every word. But whether legend or truth, the galaxy remembered the man who carried the flame, who burned through darkness, and who taught them that one person, standing tall, could change everything. And high above a restored Earth, far from the ruins of war, a monument floated in orbit, a simple statue of a man and a woman, standing together, fire in their eyes, and carved below it the words that had lit the stars, "We are the fire, and we do not kneel."